Hey friends, it's Sarah Rittendale. When I decided to act against all the toxic thoughts and feelings I was living with daily and try to become my best self, I quickly fell into the very common trap of perfectionism. So, I decided to create a space where wellness doesn't mean being flawless. Becoming the best version of yourself doesn't just come from conversations about managing your mean mind, learning confidence, and always doing the things that you're supposed to do. Here, we talk about how normal your toxic feelings and thoughts are, that you're not doing something wrong because you don't always feel, think, or act how you envision your best self to, how to implement self-improvement strategies in a realistic way, and we do this through a variety of topics that often prompt our best selves to crave emergence. My mission? Inspire you to recognize that you don't have to be perfect to consider yourself whole, healthy, and well. This is the Well-ish podcast.
Hey, welcome back to Well-ish. We're diving into a topic that I have learned recently more people than just me have struggled with, the way we view moms and motherhood. I've had a few conversations with friends and listeners who admit to feeling a bit judgmental towards moms, and honestly, I've felt it myself. The thing is that a lot of this judgment seems to come from a place of insecurity. So today, we're unpacking fears like perfectionism, feeling inadequate, or even the fear of losing yourself if you decide to have kids. So to help us get real about this, I'm joined by a powerhouse guest, Sarah Praise. She's a personal trainer, yoga instructor, CEO, businesswoman, and mom who's been through her own struggles with postpartum depression and mom guilt. So we're here to explore how to reclaim our sense of control over our lives and break through these fears. I really wanted to talk about this mostly because of my own resentment towards moms. When I see them on the internet, when I see them out in life, I just really have this resistance towards them, and it causes a lot of back and forth for me in my own mind because I would like to be a mom one day, but for whatever reason, whether it's my own insecurity, it's what I saw growing up, it's me having been a people pleaser, somebody who cared a lot about other people's opinions, and I've worked really hard to live for myself, to commit to something that I'm fully living for other little human beings. It's just daunting to think about putting myself in that position. So I thought it would be really nice to have somebody come in who doesn't make their entire personality being a mom and have her walk us through those feelings, what we can do about them, and how motherhood really is pretty normal. Now, this isn't typically a topic that I would touch with a 10-foot pole. It seems like something that I would never discuss, but I have had a lot of moms fill out my guest form to be on the podcast, and instead of turning a blind eye, I decided with these realizations coming up recently that we should talk about it because we are in this age bracket, or late 20s, early 30s, that becoming a mom is really relevant, and it's going to be really hard to have control over what we want to do with our lives if we have all of these mentalities that are coming from a toxic place compared to healing that part of us and coming at it with a little bit more of a healed perspective. So before we get into it, I just want to say the best way to support the show is to rate and review. And if you haven't already, please subscribe so that you can get more episodes that help us sort through and normalize these messy, imperfect feelings that all of us have. Without further ado, whether it's the fear of losing yourself, the pressure to choose the right path, or the guilt of wondering if you're enough, we're getting real about it all. This isn't your typical conversation about motherhood. It's raw, it's honest, and it's about giving ourselves permission to feel what we feel without the pressure of perfection. So let's get into it. Sarah, thank you so much for being on Well-ish. I'm so excited to have you on the show and talk to you about this.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So I've had a lot of conversations with listeners and friends that really admit to feeling a lot of resentment toward moms and motherhood. And I've realized that a lot of this judgment, even in myself, comes from insecurities of like feeling inadequate, pressure to make certain lifestyle choices, perfectionism, fear of being judged themselves, especially because they're doing so much judging of the moms beforehand, and the worry of losing who we are if we become a mom. So I just feel like there's a lot of comparison that we all, typically get caught up in, but really surrounded around this motherhood idea too. And when I found your story, not only as a mom, but as a personal trainer, a yoga instructor, a CEO, a businesswoman, I thought that you would be able to provide us with some really good insight. You've talked about that you have struggled with postpartum depression and mom guilt, which I also know can be really big fears for women, because I think that it can create this underlying, once again, insecurity or fear of what if I put myself in this position and I decide to become a mom and my mental health hits the fan. That also, obviously makes things a lot scarier. So
For sure.
I think as women are reaching a time or are in a time that we feel more empowered to choose other paths than motherhood. So choosing motherhood can be seen as almost stereotypical. So I'd love for you to unpack some of these feelings and fears with us, and so that we can feel more control without feeling like we have to rule out motherhood altogether. So if you want to tell me your story, your background, how you got to this point, that would be awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'll preface everything with I was the best mom before I had children. And I think a lot of moms say that, like the talk about the judgment. I didn't become a mom until I was 36. So a lot of my friends that had kids, I'd lived their journey through them. And I was that person. I was like, oh, really? That's what you're going to do? I would never do that as a mom.
Yeah.
We've all had those moments. If you have children, you've definitely been on the other side of it. And then you have kids and you're like, oh, this makes sense. I get this now. So that's like where the place that I'm coming from is. But so I had my daughter when I was 36. And so she's 8 now. So it's definitely been a journey. And we tried for a long time to have her, as someone does after the, great old age of 35 when you're geriatric. And, we were blessed to have her, super happy to have her. And then talk about feeling the guilt after, because we had tried so hard and so long, and it finally happened. And I was, if I'm being very honest, incredibly miserable. I lost every sense of self. My physical health, obviously, my body completely morphed and changed, as one does when it grows a human. My social life was not what it was. I was living in Los Angeles at the time. My closest of friends didn't have children yet, because I was one of the first ones at 36 to have kids out there. And so that part suffered. I couldn't do anything that I was doing before. I couldn't go to like a noon yoga class while I was running my own business and take care of my mental health in the way that I did before. And I really didn't give it any thought before I became a mom. Like there was no plan, because every book you read, every podcast you listen to, everything was talking about, how to get them to sleep through the night. How do you breastfeed? How do you first few days at home? And it's all about taking care of the baby. And everyone else from the outside is like, how's the baby doing? How's the baby doing? Is she, everybody cares about the baby, but very few people actually ask like, how are you doing?
Interesting.
And the people that ask, are you doing? They're just expecting you to say, like a lot of times, good. How are you? Like, oh, this is fine. But things weren't fine. And it was a real dark struggle through those first 6 months of postpartum, undiagnosed postpartum depression and anxiety, and really postpartum rage. Like I was angry. I was angry because I wasn't myself. I was angry because I couldn't do anything that I used to do. And I felt worse. I felt guilty. And then you layer on guilt, and I felt worse about it. And you layer on more guilt. And I don't blame my doctor, but the way it was presented to me, I went in for my 6-week appointment and they said, you're feeling okay, right? I mean, I don't even know how you answer that question. You're feeling okay, right? My answer was no. And he said, well, elaborate a little bit. Are you weepy? Are you like, do you feel like you have baby blues and all these things? And I was like, no, I'm pissed. Like I'm angry about my situation. I'm not angry at my daughter, but I'm angry that I'm stuck home all day. I had trouble breastfeeding. She had some physical things that she was dealing with. So she spent some time in the NICU. I was like, no, I don't think this is how you should feel. Like we waited so long to do this. And I kind of had those feelings of like, oh God, what did I do? Like, this is not what I envisioned this to be. And like a lot of doctors, brushed it off because I wasn't crying. I didn't have trouble getting out of bed. I didn't struggle to take care of my daughter. And then I just was sent on my way. And I hear this as I started to tell my story years later, that this is a lot of women's journey through it, that they're like, oh, this is normal. It will pass. It will, whatever. And so 6 months in, I hit a real dark spot and had some very dark visions of, ending it and just being like, I can't do this. This is not my path. I'm a terrible mom. I'm a terrible spouse, just all of those spiraling thoughts. And I said, well, I can't do this because what if my mom felt this? And then I had to grow up without a mom. And that's what really kind of shook me out of it. And I signed up for a yoga class bright and early the next day. I kind of went back to my roots of, I was a teacher at that point, but hadn't taught in months because of my pregnancy. And I went the next morning and I just kind of went in with the mentality of like, this is what it is. I had a broken tailbone at the time, so I couldn't lay on my back. So I spent most of the class on my side and I laid on my mat for the first time in 6 months and I just cried. I was just like, this is my life and this is depressing. And I could not get up enough energy to even get to my feet as all of these beautiful bodies were moving around me in this space. And after class, I embarrassingly rolled up my mat and the instructor came over who I did not know. And she put her hand on my shoulder and she just said, I don't know what you have going on, but the most important part is you showed up. Just keep showing up. And really, she knows now that she completely changed my life. I walked home that day and I was like, I just have to show up. I have to show up and I don't have to just show up for everyone else. I need to start showing up for myself, which was the big mindset shift because people don't tell you to do that as a mom.
It's so true.
And you give and you give and you give. And when do you take a little? And it's okay to take a little.
We're a couple minutes in and you've already given me chills because do you think most women experience this?
I don't know if most do, but I think in some degree, there's that moment of like, oh my God, I've really lost myself. Especially if you're someone that decides, like, I didn't know if I would be a stay-at-home mom. I was like, I could still do my own business. I could still work part-time. The shift from like leaving full-time career to being home with a child at 36, when that was everything I knew in my adult life, was incredibly difficult. And no one told me or warned me on how difficult that decision would be. And now I remind moms, that's a hard decision, but it's not a permanent decision. I think I also in the time looked at it as a permanent decision of like, well, this is my choice. And now I'm stuck with it. And that's simply not true a lot of the time.
Right. Absolutely. And I just think it's so interesting and that if we talked about that more, if people talked about the way that they felt and literally everything that you just said, if that was more normal and expected compared to, I feel like what motherhood a lot of the time looks like from the outside is this is the greatest decision I've ever made. I love them. I have best friends now. We're taking cute pumpkin patch pictures and everything's wonderful. And it's like people like me and other people that I've talked to it makes me feel like, what's wrong with me? Like, why am I broken? What's wrong in my brain that I am so afraid of doing something like that or just so resistant to it. So it's nice to hear the bad stuff so that you're prepared when you do make the decision, if you choose to make that decision, that these things happen to people. You're not alone.
And I tell people that deciding to have a baby is a permanent decision, but what you do with that, there's lots of options. There's lots of choices. Just because you've always had in your head, you want to be a stay-at-home mom, and then you're in it and you're like, God, this isn't for me. And I've had very close friends go through that struggle of like, this is what I thought my path was. This is what I thought my calling was. And I hate it. I can't do it. I will be a better mom if I go back to work and they go somewhere else for during the day. And then we reconvene and I can be a better mom because of it. And I think there's a lot of guilt tied into that.
Sure, but you're always allowed to change your mind. I mean, how allowed to change your mind? Right. How often have you, not even regarding motherhood, have you been in a situation that you think, oh, okay, I'm going to do this. This is going to be great. And then it doesn't turn out the way you thought it did. You have to redirect. Absolutely.
I encourage women not to leave their jobs. Don't quit your career. Don't just take a leave and then reassess, because you don't know until you're in that situation how you're going to feel or how you think you're supposed to feel. Like for me, I grew up with a stay-at-home mom. I thought, oh, that's what you do. This is what you do. Me too. I mean, times are very different now. Most people can't do that. Most families need 2 incomes and can't make it work. True. So that alone is different. And then really
Yeah.
with all the people you surround yourself with. So if you have this like a supportive community of people that are honest and are not just like, oh my God, my baby's sleeping 14 hours a night and breastfeeding, I love it. It's such a bonding thing. And it's not necessarily how you feel, that feels worse. And that's the
Yeah.
situation I was in as a new mom of all these people were showing up to mommy and me like looking like they stepped off a runway with their brand new, like their clothes
Yeah.
and their hair and nails done. I looked like a homeless person at best most days.
Yeah.
And I was struggling in every sense of the word. And it hurt even more because it was
Yeah.
like, why can everyone else seem to figure this out, but I can't? And that
Right.
alone is a very lonely feeling. And I always encourage people, I'm like, you want a safe space? I'm your safe space. Tell me how it really is, how it's really going. And
Yeah.
it feels good to do that because then you're like, oh, I'm not alone. I'm not the only person that feels like this.
Absolutely. I agree. I feel like a lot of this too, again, comes back into that reality of motherhood versus perception of motherhood.
Mhm.
What was your experience? How did it differ from what you expected? Like, what was your expectation going into it?
I greatly underestimated how sleep deprivation is the real deal.
Interesting.
Like people
Interesting.
tell you, oh, sleep now, sleep now. And I unfortunately had like terrible insomnia during pregnancy. So I'm like, one, you can't store sleep. If that was a thing, then, you'd be a kabillionaire if you could store sleep, but you cannot. And then you're like, well, the baby's going to be up, but you don't anticipate what it feels like to be on like an hour and a half of sleep. And then you have to function. And you have to function in a way that you're caring for another human that can't do anything by themselves. So it's not like you can just be like, oh, I had a bad night's sleep. Okay, I'll power through. When I get home from work, I'll shut down. Like that was no longer an option. And I greatly underestimated how sleep deprivation affected not just my physical health, clearly it affected my physical health, but my mental and emotional health as well. That was the biggest shock to me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what did you do then to start navigating through that postpartum depression, mom guilt? Like, what were your first steps?
Well, that first step was just to be real honest with myself and to be real honest with my husband, because I also had these like fake expectations I was making up in my head that
Sure.
because I was home with my daughter, I was also responsible for literally everything, like all the cooking and the cleaning and like all the household stuff. And when we finally sat down and I was like, I can't do this. Like I can barely get through the day. And he's like, why do you think you have to? Like, why do you think that this is the case? And it was
Mhm.
like, I'm like, oh, I don't know. And then we took a deeper dive into like why that is. It's because it's what I saw. That's what my mom
Right.
did.
Repeating
So that's just
patterns.
like, it was just in me already. Like I didn't give it any thought. I wasn't thinking, oh, now that I'm a stay-at-home mom, this is what I have to do. Like I just went into like this full-blown mode, the only thing I had seen. And
Mhm.
when you don't see something different, you don't know something different. So the conversations with my husband of trying to balance everything out, I did start saying yes to people. Like my friends that did not have kids would be like, can we bring dinner over on Thursday night? Yes. Like it was hard, but I was like, yes. I had a friend come in and do all the laundry, like all the sheets and strip the beds and did the baby stuff. And just, she came in for an afternoon and did laundry. Now it's a gift I give to my friends that they have kids because it was a great gift. Like it was
Mhm.
months in and I was like, oh my God, I can't even keep up with the bare minimum of things. So
Yeah.
yeah, having those conversations, being truly honest. And then I confided in one close friend of how dark things were. And she
Mhm.
encouraged me to go start therapy. And so I did. She also encouraged me to find a pelvic floor physical therapist, which I recommend highly to everyone that gives birth. Even if you don't give birth, if you're like in your mid 30s, like go to a pelvic floor therapist and see what's going on down there because things shift and things change.
Yeah.
And with a little bit of therapy, you don't have to struggle with anything down there. Like I have friends now that are like, how do you jump? I'm like, what do you mean, how do I jump? They're like, I pee. I'm like, you shouldn't
Oh,
pee.
yeah.
You're a healthy 40-year-old. You shouldn't pee. This is not something you need to deal with.
Yeah.
So between the
Really?
pelvic floor therapy, just the talk therapy, and then saying yes. And it's hard when you're in that situation because you're like, I shouldn't need help. I should be able to do this. But when people are asking what they can do, they really do want to help you. They're not just saying, oh, let me know if you need anything. Like
Mhm.
most of your
Yeah.
friends really mean it and just start saying yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's good advice. How can we reframe that judgment toward moms to be more empathetic, especially when
Mhm.
so much of it is rooted in that personal insecurity?
Oh, it's so hard. It's like the personal insecurity and how do you undo, like for me, 36 years of
Right.
training, of like that
Right.
deep training. And I think you just have to start small. Like for me, I always go back to like two major things, like I can't pour from an empty cup. kind of like, if I'm not my best, how can I give my best? And then the other one's a little more selfish of like, I want to enjoy this. And if I'm drained and stressed and overwhelmed, I'm not going to enjoy this age or stage of motherhood. And it's
Yes.
so short. So those are like the two things that I come back to when I am like, obviously not every day is a great day. And you come back to like, okay, I need to take care of myself, put that oxygen mask on me, because if I'm passed out, I can't help anybody else. And then you do want to enjoy this. Like, and when you're exhausted and run down too much, you can't enjoy it. So just finding that reconnection and finding that like mindfulness in the little things, because, you have a 5-year-old running around. It's like, this time is so short and it goes so fast and you don't realize it until you're a mom and you're like, people are not lying. They say this all the time for a reason. These stages are so short. And I'd hate to look back on it and be like, wow, I was miserable. Like if I only took care of myself, which I've had a lot of friends say of like, I couldn't keep up with them. I couldn't play at the playground because I was so tired. Because I was fueling my body with sugar and coffee and not exercising, like a lot of like common pitfalls we fall into, right?
Right. Absolutely. So that kind of shifts me into what I want to talk to you about next. I can't talk today.
That's fine. We all have our days.
Really. What I want to talk to you about next, though, is the self-care, like finding that balance without guilt. So you said that you're a big believer in the importance of self-care for moms. So for people, there's a feeling that taking time for oneself is selfish. How do you redefine self-care for moms and why is it important?
I actually think if you don't take time for yourself, it's a selfish move because you're not giving your best to your families. Like it's not like, I don't take care of myself so I can take care of my family. I mean, some days I do. I take care of myself so I want to take care of my family. So I want to do those things. And I think going into motherhood, a lot of people think self-care and it's like spa days, manicures, pedicures, massages, like big things that like take care of yourself. But like I tell the moms I work with, it's like movement, it's meal prep, and it's mindfulness. And it doesn't need to take long and it doesn't need to be complicated. Anything that fills your cup is self-care. So like for me, I love reading to my kids. Like I love, especially now that they're 6 and 8 and they're reading some pretty cool, like detective books and things like that. At the end of no matter how bad the day is, if I can sit down and read to them, like that fills my cup. So that's a version of self-care. You don't necessarily have to be alone to indulge in self-care either. It can be by yourself. It can be with your family, friends, especially as a mom, having those mom friends, having like people that you can really relate to, especially if they're in the same stage of motherhood. And we just got to start small. My whole thing for my company is 2% of the day. So less than 30 minutes. You don't need to go to an hour spin class or an hour yoga class, like all these places kind of drill in your head. Like if you don't have an hour, then kind of why bother? So it's really easy to fall into the like all or nothing. And it's just little things each day. Like I just put together my newsletter for next week. And it's a lot of us are spending time in the car. Like a lot of the moms I work with are like toddlers and they're in daycare or they're after school activities. They're in middle school. You're basically a chauffeur. And taking like the mindfulness, it's just 90 seconds as you sit in that carpool line to just sit up tall, close your eyes if you're obviously not driving, and then count 50 times. So inhale, exhale to 50. It's like 90 seconds. And that counts. You don't have to be like a monk on a mountainside to reap the benefits of that type of mindfulness or meditation. People get a little weird when I say meditation sometimes.
Yeah, it's the practicality of it, because I think that a lot of the time when we hear the word self-care, we think so much like doing all this extra stuff that isn't necessary, or like you're saying, like taking out chunks of time throughout your day to get this stuff done, which then once you are a mom and you don't have the time or the space to be able to spend all of this time like you used to, it can I could picture it feeling so overwhelming and being like, well, this is my life now. I can't do anything for myself anymore. So I think it's validating.
Easy.
Yeah, right.
Well, that all or nothing of like, oh, well, I can't get to the gym. I can't do this. So I can't do anything. Well, it's usually not the case. I say like, make the next healthy choice. Maybe that's just drinking a glass of water. Maybe it's painting your toenails with your kids. Like,
totally.
Also need to be like 2%. A childcare situation. 2%.
That's such a realistic goal to shoot for, because obviously you could do more than 2%. Like you're saying, you can fill your cup up by reading with your kids, but just making sure that you get at minimum that 2% is really, That's validating. I like that a
And
lot.
then it snowballs. You start with the 2% and then you're like, oh, I sneak in this
Oh,
here.
sure.
Oh, I do a 10-minute walk here. And then all of a sudden it builds and builds and builds. And maybe you are up to an hour of like doing something that benefits your physical, mental, or emotional health throughout the course of the day. But you got to start somewhere.
Sure. What's interesting is it sounds like if you have the right tools or knowledge even ahead of time that you're able to maintain that normalcy in your life. But I feel like sometimes it's not normal beforehand because all you have to worry about is yourself a lot of the time. And so if tonight you're like, yeah, screw it, I don't want to eat dinner, or I want to go to Taco Bell instead, you can. But when you have kids, you have to have more of that routine. So that totally would be almost like a culture shock that you're like, I can't do the things that I want to do anymore, but it's because you have people depending on you.
And it's actually why I developed the program that I developed. It was exactly what I craved when I became a mom. Like I needed someone to tell me, how is it safe to move this new body that I was frankly grossed out about? Like I just had lost everything. I was like, this, I know this can't stay. This can't be my new normal, but how do I safely get to where I was? So I went in and got certified in perinatal strength and conditioning and yoga and kind of layered on things to kind of teach myself. And then I could practice what I preached. And it was very nice to be able to have, I'm like, okay, here I am starting at day one. What does this look like? How long does it take? Realistically, with the ups and downs and the ebbs and flows, how long does someone really need to commit to something to do this? So now I tell people exactly what to do, how many steps to get, what to eat, how to think, literally give you everything. So it takes a while, it takes away that mental load of it. And it's like a 12-week, all comprehensive transformation. And I call it a transformation because you really do see not just like the people usually have I want to lose weight. That's, I mean, 99% of people that come to me are like, I just want to lose weight. I want to have more energy. And that's like where people start. But that's an overwhelming goal. If you have 30, 40, 50, 60 pounds to lose, you're like, how do you start that journey?
Right.
And you start that journey just one little thing at a time. So the program eases in. It's not like, okay, this week we're going to do 7 workouts and it's going to be this, it's going to be super high intensity. And no one's ready for that.
Right. Well, and it is totally a transformation. Again, going back to that same idea that like before you have kids, you don't follow these routines and patterns and things that are good for you. But then once you have them, you realize how badly you need them in order to maintain some sort of order in your life and in your mind. So of course it's a transformation. Of course it's different. And honestly, I feel like it doesn't have anything to do with, oh, I have kids, I can't do anything. It has to do with that you had kids. So now you got to create a life around it. That's so cool. Maturity, right?
Yeah, it comes with time.
Exactly. So that makes me want to talk to you. So back to that kind of the judgment and that overcoming fear and finding empowerment through becoming a mom. So for many young women, there's a fear of losing themselves or sacrificing their goals if they become moms. So how do you help women address these fears and see motherhood as a part of their identity rather than their identity as a whole?
Yeah, it's a piece of the puzzle. Like my mom piece is a pretty big piece. Obviously, my kids are little. Like that's a big piece of the puzzle, but it's not always going to be the biggest piece of the puzzle. Like they're going to grow and it's going to get a little bit smaller. It will always be a major piece, but then you have your career piece and you have your relationship piece, and you should definitely have a friendship or support piece of it. And these pieces shift and change all throughout our life. And I think coming in with some semblance of a plan or an intention, being like, I'm not going to not see my friends for months on end kind of thing. I schedule like my social, like my mom night out things, my workouts, my little things in my phone, like they're doctor's appointments, like they're an absolute not miss meeting. So like I'm doing a mom's night out tomorrow night. It's been in the calendar for like 6 weeks. Friday night will come. I really won't feel like going because it's Friday night and I'm tired and I go anyways because it's a required meeting. And there's not one time that I have forced myself out to go that I've ever regretted it. Yeah. So it's like planning ahead for those times. And I wish I did that earlier in motherhood. It took me into like after that 6-month mark at 8 or 9 months, a bunch of women in LA, we went out for like a staycation and stayed in the Hollywood Hills for a night. It was like the best thing I could have done for my mental health. I was away for 18 hours. I've never missed a human more in my life than I did my daughter during those 18 hours. But we ordered fancy takeout and we put on fancy dresses that did not fit us. And we hung by the pool And it was so good for my mental and emotional health. And it's just, you have to schedule those things in a lot more. It's not like, hey, you want to meet up for happy hour? Sure. When you're single,
Mhm.
it's easier, but it just takes a lot more planning. And once you do it, it's worth it. It is always worth it.
Yeah. I think it's so interesting because a lot of people live life kind of hoping that there will just inevitably be structure, and you don't realize, like, especially because like when you grow up, right, you're like in school and you have your parents and everybody's structuring everything for you. Then you come out into the real world as an adult and you're like, wait, I have no structure. Like even like your job, like you choose whether you want to stay at your job or leave your job or do something else with your life, move to France, whatever.
Yeah.
There's all this freedom. So I think that being able to say, like, I have to structure this for myself. I have to, if I want to have a good life, if I want to enjoy my experience, if I want to maintain my own identity, you have to go out there and make that happen for yourself by like scheduling events like this and making sure that you're doing things that will fill your cup and make you feel good.
And if you're thinking about having kids or already have kids, I often think about like, I have 2 girls, 6 and 8 now. Like, how do my girls see me? Like, what do they see me doing? And now, especially that they're older, they're not toddlers anymore. They voice it. Like, they see me taking care of myself. They see me getting strong. They see me like taking care of not just my physical health, but like going out with my friends and doing social things. They don't always like it, but they see it. I never saw that as a child. My mom was home with us. Maybe once in a while they'd go to like a neighborhood Christmas party, but it wasn't like
Same.
they leaned in on their social kind of side of things for support or anything like that. It was also different because we lived near a lot of family. So like their siblings were around and things like that. But it's like, what do you want your kids to see? And also what kind of mom do you want them to remember? Do you want them to remember you being exhausted and angry all the time and you're frustrated because you're not doing anything for yourself? Or do you want to physically leave for an hour and go do something and come back and be happy mom
Right.
and have
Right.
them remember
Absolutely.
that?
So Wellish is all about not being perfect. Like that a lot of the time, self-improvement or self-help or mental health work all has this underlying message of perfectionism. And I feel that really happens a lot with moms, that like there's this level of like standard that you're supposed to uphold and you're not allowed
social
to
media.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Instagram.
Right. So can you talk about that at all? Like embracing that imperfection and being good enough and feeling good enough and all of that without having to be 100% perfect?
Absolutely. There's 2 things that I remind the moms I work with all the time. Like if you have 20% left to give, like the end of the day, bedtime is not my strong side of the day. I'm a morning person. I'm great in the morning, but come 7:30, 8 o'clock, I'm ready to shut it down. I'm ready to shut down my responsibility. I'm ready to take some time for myself and spend some time with my husband. Bedtime is not my strong suit. So sometimes at the end of the day, I have to remind myself, like I have maybe 20% left in the tank. And if I can give that 20%, I'm giving 100% of what I have left to give. And I remind myself that, especially when you get frustrated of like, you might have 1% left. And if you're giving that 1%, you're giving everything. And then the second thing is just this term of like allowing yourself some grace. That sometimes it's just messy and it's okay to be messy. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. And your kids need to see all the things. Like all of the things they need to see. Now, do I want to be a screaming maniac every night at bedtime? No. But sometimes does that side come out? It does. And then I have to step back and be like, that was bad. That was a bad version of myself, but I had a long day and we talk about it in the morning and just like mommy was frustrated. I was tired. You guys weren't going to bed because they're children and they never want to go to bed. And I don't know when that shift happens, but all I want to do is go to bed. I'm not sure what this is. We're not to that point yet. I'm maybe teenage years. I'm not sure. So just like allowing yourself the grace to not be perfect. And it is super hard. I talk to my mom about this all the time. Like with there not being social media when I grew up like in the 80s and early 90s, she's like, we just had like the neighborhood and we were all kind of like similar socioeconomic, similar values, similar, like we were just kind of like, lower middle class. They were like, there wasn't this whole like, what are your kids dressing like for Halloween? Or where's your perfect photo shoot? Like we would maybe do Christmas cards, maybe, but that was like the extent of like what you saw. She's like, now you're inundated every single day with perfection. how can you not let that get to you? How can you not,
Right.
unless you're totally not on social media, which one of my clients right now is completely not on social media. And I was like, I give you so much credit. I mean, I have to be for
Yeah,
work.
for
So
real.
I'm like, but I
Right.
try to like limit it. But it's hard when you're constantly seeing perfection. It's hard not to compare. But I do
Yeah.
try to remind myself, like, no, that's not real. Like, that's not,
Mhm.
show me that. I like when people do show me the Instagram versus reality. What did that look
Mhm.
like 5 minutes before you got that perfect picture at the pumpkin
Mhm.
patch as,
Yeah.
your son was throwing a pumpkin at your daughter?
I was just gonna say
Like,
someone
that's what I want to
screaming.
see.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Exactly. That's so cool. I like that you say that they want to see the whole picture too, because I think
Mhm,
obviously that would really help them with their own emotional intelligence and,
mhm.
everything else just being shaped into a little perfect human. Not
But you
perfect.
can see but you can see, like, why people think that way, and you go through this. I
Yeah.
mean, there's certain accounts, I'm sure that listeners can think of what someone right now in their life that only portray motherhood as being, like, this glamorous thing, and you know what? If
Yeah.
it's like that for you, then I wanna meet you because you are some sort of unicorn, and I really need to learn your ways.
Yeah.
But
Right.
chances
Really.
are, you're just like the rest of us, just trying to do the very best you can each and every day and giving to your family.
Right. Do you have any advice for people who are not mothers yet, but are thinking about it, but are too afraid because of all of these mentalities and the perfectionism on
Mhm,
Instagram and what you're supposed to
mhm.
be if you become a mom?
The good news is you can be any kind of mom you wanna be. Like, I
Hmm.
like going into that, like, I don't parent exactly how my brother parents, I don't parent how my neighbor parents, it doesn't like, you can be and it doesn't matter what you grew up with. Like, there's some great things that I took from my childhood, and there's some things that I left way in the rearview mirror of that I didn't
Hmm.
like. So you can make this whatever you wanna make this, and you can be a stay-at-home mom, or you could be still a CEO of a company, or you can be some kind of mash of both, that I do both, that now I have my own company, which I never thought was my future in wellness, that I thought that I would do corporate wellness or I would stay in just like the education side of things. But you carve your own path, and it's not a pretty path all the time, but you do get to carve your own path. And motherhood is the single greatest thing I could have ever done. As hard as my struggle was in the beginning, I'd relive every single day of it to be able to
Hmm.
have this time with my kids now. Like, it's the greatest journey ever, but it's also the hardest. Like, I'm not going to lie and
Yeah.
say that it's not. It's not all rainbows and unicorns, although most of my life is rainbows and unicorns with two girls. But it's not like this picture perfect thing. And that's okay, because what in life is perfect? Jobs
Right.
aren't perfect, friendships aren't perfect, relationships aren't perfect. It's life. Like, life just tends to life. And
Right.
you're way stronger than you think.
Yeah. It's very empowering because I just feel that, yeah, like you feel this fear of like falling into the same pit as like the
Mhm.
stereotypical, the basic, boy mom, girl mom, it's in my
Oh
Instagram
my goodness.
bio. Yeah. And it's like it's so easy to feel like, oh my God, I don't want to be that, but you don't have to be.
Mhm.
You're just
You
still
don't have to
yourself.
be.
Right.
Yeah.
It
And I always
just
thought I'd be a boy mom because I was a tomboy growing up. I thought I was going to
Mhm.
have kids. I was going to have boys. I got one of the girliest girls in the history of girls. And guess what? We roll with it, and we do with a situation like we do everything in life. She's
Yeah.
like nothing like I imagined to have when I was going to mother someone. And now I'm
Yeah.
dealing with all the things at 6. And I'm like, okay, here we are.
Right. You can't plan your life. You can't predict the
You can't.
future.
You
Hmm.
can't. And it's like with everything. And yes, it can be a terrifying decision, especially if you've waited so long and you know that
Yeah.
it could possibly be a journey to get pregnant and stay pregnant, because that's a whole
Hmm.
nother situation. But if there's an inkling in your body that you want to be a mom, then you probably want to be a mom. And then
Yeah.
you meet that little one, and then you'll be happy you did. Maybe not instantly, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
But it is and that's something I remind people also, that
Yeah.
you might not feel that instant thing that they tell you to feel. You can't
Hmm.
believe everything you read, and you can't believe everything you see.
I love that. Can you talk a little bit about, you said that you didn't become a mom until you were 36.
Mhm.
Do you think that was better that you were older? Do you think it matters? Yeah.
I think it's way better.
Okay.
Because I think I see, like, my college roommate, all she ever talked about in college was becoming a mom. She wanted to be a mom. She
Mhm.
wanted to be a mom. She mom. Her parents made her go to college. She just wanted to be a mom. She got pregnant right after college graduation. Her now husband got married. I think, oh my goodness, they just celebrated their like 25th wedding anniversary. They have 4 kids. It's all she ever wanted to do. I didn't feel that way. I didn't
Mhm.
always want to be. I had a very long point in my 20s that I didn't know if I wanted to have kids. And it wasn't until I was with the right person that I was like, oh, okay, I get this. Like when you know,
Mhm.
kind of situation. And
Yeah.
then we decided to have a family, but there's no way that at 24 that I could have been a mom. And if I was, I would not have been nearly as good a mom as I am now. There's
Yeah.
no way I could have handled what like maybe the sleep deprivation would have been easier because I think being 10
Yeah.
years younger would have helped. Maybe that's the only thing. But just the patience and the growth and just the tolerance for like a toddler in my 20s, I didn't have it then. But in
Interesting.
my late
True.
30s, I have it and I have the patience most days. And I am just you're just a different person than you are in your early 20s versus your late 30s. So I
Yeah.
think the timing worked out the way it was supposed to work out for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that you say that too. Just that, you're able to almost prepare, for lack of a better word, more
Mhm.
because you can build who you are and know yourself and know how you react to things and how you want to go
Mhm.
about life much better the older you get and the more time you spend independently, or even, I mean,
Mhm.
still with a partner, even,
Yeah.
but on your own, you can make that decision before
Mhm.
you add dependence and then are trying to figure it out. So that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And the more you see other people do it, like you see, and I had close friends that were honest of how hard things were and how much they struggled. I got to live and learn through them. And then when it became my experience, I had a lot more in my toolbox
Sure.
versus my college roommate who was 22 and jumped into this and she didn't know anyone that had kids. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately didn't find like a community until her kids were in school. So she was
Yeah.
alone for like loneliness was a big part of hers because she just didn't have a support group.
Right. Absolutely. So, to wrap things up, I
Mhm.
like to ask my guests, I play a game with them called Kinda Toxic, Kinda Well. So, I like to
I like
ask
this.
them a series of questions that highlights that we're not all perfect, because a lot of the time, the people that I have on my show do seem to have it all together. And so it kind of brings some honest conversation to show your own
Mhm.
feelings. But because you guys typically are so healed, we get a lot of valuable insight from it. So, if you're
Mhm.
down, I've got a couple questions left for
Of
you.
course.
Okay, sweet. So, first one, when do you find yourself feeling anxious?
When I don't know what's coming next.
Good answer. What do you do
When we
about it?
don't have a plan when we don't have a plan. I tend to take out like a paper calendar that shows my age, like a big paper calendar, and I put forth a plan. I'm like,
That's cool.
just to look at sometimes seeing it in big picture takes down some of it.
Sure, absolutely. What causes you to doubt yourself?
For me, in the first thing I thought of was in my business life when I have a mom that's not seeing results, and I'm like, "Is it me?" And that's always the first thing we
Mhm.
go to, and I think
Yep.
as women, that's what we do. We're
Yeah.
like, "I'm here to hold them accountable. It's not me." Like, I have a
Mhm.
proven system, but in those moments, like when I have a weekly call and if someone's really struggling, that I'm like, "Ooh," I always take a step back and be like, kinda look in the mirror first and
Mhm.
then kind of be like, okay, let's ask them all the questions I need to ask them to make sure that they're holding up their end of the bargain. But having doubt, as a wellness professional is what gets me.
What do you do about it when you feel that self-doubt?
So I journal. So I have a long journal of times it's kind of split, like times I've been feeling really strong and like mentally strong and times where I'm not feeling great at all. And I go back to the times I'm feeling strong and it's like I'm getting results from my clients. I'm getting results for myself. I'm feeling really productive and I go back to those like past entries. And then I journal on the bad side because that's where my thoughts are and kind of like declutter my thought process of like I've been writing a lot of like, well, why do I first look to me? Like, why
Mhm.
do I first take it on? And I
Mhm.
think now, 20 years into this, I think that's just what I am. Like, I think that's how I operate. And I think that's how I can help women because I do take it on and then I sort
Mhm.
through it. And then we sort through, okay, like let's take this piece by piece. What is a typical day looking like for you? What is a typical day should look like for you? Kind of thing
Mhm.
in order to step in the right direction. But I do. It's
Sweet.
like that mirror to myself all the time.
Right.
I think a lot of us do that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mhm.
That's very relatable. When do you catch yourself feeling resentful?
Oh, my husband travels for work and I'm a single
Mm.
parent. Ooh,
Mhm.
that was a rough one to say. Yeah, that's where I felt it in my gut of like, I even said to him the other night that I was like, I would love to travel for work and not cook and clean for 7 days. Like
Yeah,
that would be it's a hard pill to swallow.
Absolutely. What do you do to kind of help soothe that for yourself?
I'm working through it is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
He's leaving this Sunday, and he'll be gone Sunday to Friday for next week.
Okay.
And so we've planned dinner with friends, and we're going to have play dates to come over after school. So it's mostly that dinner, bath, bedtime that is just like, I'm tired, I'm drained, I've had a long day. Like, how are we going to do this? So we're going to build in some like extra fun activities in there and do more takeout. And like, I have a friend, like we're going over a friend's house on Tuesday for dinner, so I don't have to cook. So just kind of, once again, like planning and like scheduling some things that we don't normally do. Like my kids really want McDonald's, and I hate McDonald's beyond belief.
Yeah, same. My
said,
stepson
"Okay."
loves McDonald's.
I'm like, why? Who introduced
I
you to
know.
you? And why is this an obsession?
No, I know.
So I told them like one night next week after one of our activities, I was like, we'll do that. And I'll pick up Thai food because there's no way I'm eating McDonald's. But my husband doesn't like Thai food. So I'm going to get food that I usually get. So yeah, just kind of like, and it's still just a challenging week to not have a partner. It really makes my heart goes out to single parents. And how you do this when you have no one to say, tag, I'm done. Like some days you just don't have it in you.
Yeah. I like that a lot. It really brings it back to the regaining control where you can and making sure that you're creating structure.
Control what you can control, because so much of it we can't.
Right. Right. When do you feel shameful?
When I ate like 18 pieces of Halloween candy last week.
Real.
It's a real struggle. Halloween fell at a not so great time of month for me. And I'm not even really a big sugar candy person. I found myself like popping Skittles like you would not believe. And then I picked my kids up at the bus stop. I thought I was going to throw up. It was awful. Like I felt horrible, like instantly.
All the wrappers fall out of your car.
It was awful. And then I got there and it was like all these moms standing around. I was like, I have a candy confessional. I literally listed everything I hate. And I was like, this is embarrassing. I'm supposed to be the example, but it was pretty bad. It was not moderation. It was not, under no circumstance do I say no candy, but come on, Sarah, get it together.
Yeah, right. That's hilarious. Last one. If you could give one piece of advice to somebody trying to become more well than toxic, what advice would you give them?
Start small. Don't wait till New Year's. So many people wait till New Year's. Yeah. And they have a list of 25 things they're going to change, and none of them stick.
No.
Like pick like one tiny thing, like get up in the morning and sit on the edge of your bed and take 3 deep breaths and think about one thing you're grateful for. Like that's small. And then do that for like 2 weeks and then build onto it. Because I think we take on too much as humans and as women in general, and especially as moms. So just to do a tiny something.
It's like if you just start that day, or you start, you eat bad for lunch and breakfast, but you want to make a change. So you start at dinner. It doesn't have to start on the 1st of the month or on Monday or whatever.
And that's a great point, because it's a lot of people will be like, oh, I'll start on Monday. I have a joke with my mom. I'm like, do not start on Monday. Like, stop starting on Monday. Like if you have something horrible for lunch, make sure you have a healthy dinner. Like if something horrible for lunch, how about you just have a couple extra glasses of water? Like it doesn't need to be, once again, it doesn't need to be huge. And that's why I do. And I offer through the month of December, a healthy holiday challenge. And I text at one morning, like one thing each day for you to think about, to just like make your holiday like this much healthier. So when you go into January, you're not 7 to 10 pounds heavier. You're feeling good about things, starting, if you're a resolution person, starting off strong.
Yeah. Love that. I love it. Where can people find you, Sarah?
Mostly on Instagram. My Instagram handle is Great Days by Sarah. Send me a DM, say hi. I love answering wellness questions, anything to do with like fitness, meal prep planning, mindfulness. It doesn't need to be monk on a mountainside kind of mindfulness and meditation kind of things. And then I have a Facebook group called Time Out for Moms. If you are a mom or even thinking about becoming a mom, there's a lot of non-moms in there, and it's wellness, accountability, and support. And we do monthly challenges and interviews like this. We bring in people like experts in motherhood and all things women in general, and a lot of menopause talk now. The women are in that perimenopause. That's becoming more of a hot topic to talk about, which is another great thing.
Yeah, so aggravating.
I just love to connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. You really did help me work through it. So I appreciate it.
I'm glad.
Yeah. So I'm sure that, obviously I hope somebody else is able to take away from that too, because I really love everything that you said. I appreciate you being here.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
I don't know about you guys, but that conversation made me feel a lot less angry and judgmental of moms, and honestly, a lot less fearful of becoming one, mostly because I realized that it's all up to me. It's in my control how I want to live my day-to-day life and who I want to be if I decide to take that path of becoming a mom. I think too, the piece of it that she talks about, that you're creating structure in your day, like you have to make these things happen if you want to have a chaotic free motherhood journey, if you want to be this certain person. Like for her, again, I think it's so impressive that she has so many other titles other than mom. If that's something that's important to you, then you just have to make sure to make that happen. It's not like eliminating motherhood and judging motherhood altogether is going to get you closer. It's just going to make you bitter. It's interesting when we come to the realization that the problems that you're having are rooted in something that you weren't expecting at all. Like I had these judgmental feelings and I just thought it was, again, like I said before this started, because I was like better than people, and holy fuck is that rooted in insecurity. You know what I mean? It's so obvious once you are aware of it. The fact that like nobody has to bug me at all, like no matter what anybody does with their life, that's their decision, their prerogative, and none of my business. So who the fuck am I to have an opinion about it? But also how much more peaceful my life will be when I am able to heal these insecurities within myself. And honestly, I feel like even just this interview has helped me make a lot of progress on that just through the awareness itself. It just sets us up, I feel, to be more in control of our own feelings and our own life. Remember that wherever you are on this journey, for lack of a better word, whether you're embracing motherhood, questioning it, or choosing a different path entirely, it's okay to prioritize yourself. It's okay to change your mind. You're not alone, and you're definitely not broken. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love for you to share it, subscribe, and leave a review. Until next time, keep it real, keep it wellish.